Hello ladies, it's Mr. O'Sullivan. Today we're looking at lesson 4-3, Important Theorems for Proofs, Triangle Relationships. So the few things we're looking at today are we're looking at these few terms right here. We're looking at the median of a triangle, the altitude of a triangle, the perpendicular bisector of a triangle, which we looked at briefly last week, and angle bisector. We don't have one of those in our notes today, but we did practice with angle bisectors on either Friday or Monday, I forget. Now, let's go over some definitions, make sure you fill these in. After we do this note sheet, there's a classwork assignment that you need to complete based off this. So similar images, and then just making conclusions, okay? So let's go over the definitions. The median of a triangle. Think of the median in a road, like it's the halfway point. Like I'm not sure if you're familiar with Park Avenue, but Park Avenue, I pass on my walk to the park, and there's a median in the middle of the road. It's sort of like the halfway point from the other side of Park Avenue to the other side of Park. So the median is a segment that is drawn from a vertex to the midpoint of the opposite side. Now, let's think about what a midpoint does. What does a midpoint do? Very good. A midpoint creates two congruent segments. So if I had a segment like this, and I had my midpoint right here, I can say that this segment is congruent to this segment. An altitude of a triangle. That is a segment that is drawn from a vertex perpendicular to the opposite side. Now, whenever you see the word perpendicular or this symbol, I want you to think of 90-degree angles. 90-degree angles or right angles. Okay, let's go into our next definition. A perpendicular bisector is a line that is drawn that forms two right angles and divides a side into two congruent segments. And then an angle bisector is an angle, divides an angle into two congruent angles. Now let's draw some conclusions. 1 second. Okay, perfect. So, given BD is an altitude of triangle of ABC. The first thing I'm giving you is a hint. You got to make two statements. So let's go up here to an altitude. An altitude is a segment drawn from a vertex perpendicular to the opposite side. So that means I'm making right angles. If I look at my image, I'm saying BD is the altitude. At what point are my right angles? Are they at A, D, B, or C? Very good, they're at D. So at angle D, I can say I have a right angle, 1 and 2. So my first statement is, I can say angle 1 and angle 2 are right angles. And my reasoning would just be an altitude creates right angles. But the thing is, we know that all right angles are 90 degrees. So I can say that angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent. And my reasoning would be all right angles are congruent. And that is all I can say about altitudes. So don't say anything about segments being congruent. You cannot say AD and DC are congruent. You cannot say BC and AB are congruent. We do not know that to be true. Now, number 2, RT is a median of triangle RSU. So if I look at triangle RSU, I have triangle RSU. It's my big triangle, right? And I'm saying RT is my median. Well, if you remember what we said about medians, a median is a segment drawn from a vertex to the midpoint of the opposite side. So what we're saying is we're saying that T is the midpoint of this line segment, okay? So what do we know about a midpoint? they create two congruent segments. So what two segments are congruent right here? Very good. ST and TU. I can say ST congruent to TU, and my reasoning would be a median creates two congruent segments. And that's all you have to write for medians. Number 3, AD is the perpendicular bisector of triangle ABC. Well, if we remember, perpendicular bisectors are a line that's drawn to form two right angles and divides a side into two congruent segments. So let's look at this right here. Let's focus on the perpendicular real quick. Whenever you see perpendicular, what do I want you to think of? 90-degree angles. So if I look, at what point are my right angles? Very good, they're at D. So I'm going to put a 1 and a 2. So I'm going to say angle 1 and angle 2 are right angles. And my reason could be perpendicular bisector creates right angles. But above, we said something else about the right angles. What did we say about the right angles in step 2? Very good, they're congruent. So down here, I can say angle 1 congruent to angle 2. And my reason would be all right angles congruent, or are congruent. Now, let's think a little further. We're dealing with a bisector right now of triangle ABC. So we're saying that AD is the knife that is cutting up BC. So tell me what two segments are congruent. Very good, BD and DC. So I can say BD congruent to DC, and my reasoning would be a perpendicular bisector creates two congruent segments. And that's all you can say whenever you have a perpendicular bisector. And that's it for today. If you have any questions, email myself or Ms. Calarunto.